Soren.
Yeah, how are you?
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing, man. Excited to catch up with you.
Okay, great. All right. So, perfect. You ready to take it back in the Wayback Machine?
I've been looking forward to it, my man. Yeah, just catching up on your past podcasts and seeing all the old names from the old neighborhood gets me pumped up. It's awesome.
Well, which of those guys, like, do you remember either jamming with or, playing shows with or anything like that? Like, what stood out to you?
Gosh, on your list, obviously at that time, Reston was a pretty thriving scene for hardcore music, as well as, other types and genres of music. So also a very tight-knit community, if you remember. I think it was a super small town in those days. And aside from messing around, skateboarding, getting in trouble, setting stuff on fire, all we had to do was kind of play music, and it was awesome.
So what got you into playing music? What were your first musical experiences?
That's a good question. And one of them goes way back, all the way back to, early 80s. And I went to a summer camp and picked up the guitar. I'm sure that story happens all the time, right? But it was incidentally the same. I went to camp on one of my sessions with Dave Gilligan from Remission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also later,
kind of picked it up there. Yeah.
So was he singing along with you playing guitar?
And, at one point we did have a little thing. This is post camp, a year or two after maybe moving into the high school realm. We definitely jammed a lot. And by a lot back then, it was like 3 or 4 times, right? Nobody could really even play their instrument. And then he got, of course, a hold of Andre and a great backup band there. They were awesome. I enjoyed playing with Dave. Yeah.
Was that at Roa Day Camp, or was that a different camp?
It was a different one. It was, I think it was called St. George's Camp.
Okay. And I was, I went to Roa Day Camp for years. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Fun.
I don't know if you ever donned the yellow shirt, but.
No, I didn't. But, I may even have one of those shirts in my car wash bucket.
It was a formative experience for me.
Sure.
And, I remember we had this counselor, Chris, and he used to play the guitar around the campfire, that whole thing. I remember him playing Hotel California on guitar and just thinking it was like the coolest thing ever.
Yep. We have a similar background, my friend.
Yeah, and I made some really good friends there at Roa Day Camp. It was through stuff like that, and
it's crazy. I bet you have a bunch of them still on your social media.
Yeah. I mean, there are a ton of people from Reston that I'm able to keep in touch with through that, because unfortunately I don't get back there very much. You're still in Virginia?
I am. My wife and I moved back. Well, we moved out to a place called Waterford in Loudoun County about 5 or 6 years ago, and then we had moved to back to Reston for a while. So it was nice. I got to spend a couple years there on Jonathan's Way. Bought a condo up there, and remembered spray painting in the tunnels, right down the street, and
Did you notice like whether there was still any kind of music scene or anything there amongst the kids, or just in town, were there still people playing in bands? Was there still?
Yeah, it certainly is a lot different. Kids have a lot more access, I think, at this point, to money and social media and things like YouTube and the ability to reach out and pull a band together off of Craigslist or something like that. I think they have it a lot easier these days in that respect. However, you don't hear much, right? Back in the day, we communicated through, show flyers and things like that, and that's how we knew where everybody was getting together, or who was playing at Cedar Crest or things like that. That really drove our social circles.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
so not much in the way, and I'd like to consider myself not super old. I still try to get out and play as much as possible, but there certainly are younger kids out there today, and man, are they might even be a lot better than when we were at that age. But I don't see it in the way that it was back in the day.
Well, that's disappointing. I know.
Yeah.
I see that there are still kids like doing hip hop. There's still like MCs, and I know that that's coming out of Reston, but I don't know that there's any good, punk rock coming out of Reston right now.
Hard to say. Yeah. Aside from, I don't know if they're coming out of Reston, but Andrew Blitz from Ruined by Design.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
With and Brian Stewart too.
And Brian, exactly.
Yeah, so Brian had put together a poster last year that had all the bands on it, that were involved in Jam for Man.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
That's awesome.
I don't know if you've gotten yourself a copy of it, but considering that you're on there, you should have one at some point.
I absolutely would love to see it.
I'll definitely send you a picture of it. I'll send you a link. But,
that'd be great.
Yeah. So, when did you start playing in a band officially? And was Urban Ethics, was that the first band?
Yeah. So that was basically the band, and to be frank, the band lasted quite a long while and evolved over time, obviously. But we started out not too long after I was jamming with Dave Gilligan, and actually, come to think of it, the guy who called me up for this was also a camper, who was a keyboard player named Dave Lash, and he brought us into, and he plays and he's played throughout the Northern Virginia scene. In other circles, as well as now he's relocated in Philly, and he's still playing out up there, doing showcase gigs and things like that. But he gave me a ring and said, hey, let's get together and see what we got. I got this guy who plays guitar. I got this drummer who's a fool. I got this bass player who's, who can sing. And I was like, well, I can play guitar, barely. And I didn't know I was a singer at the time. But, I think I became the de facto singer, and I guess kind of progressed and grew, and I honestly to this day still sing, but I don't believe that I have any talent in that respect. But I just got lucky, and through practicing and pulled that together. We started out, and we were really on the outskirts of Reston at the time, right? We were in Great Falls, where we jammed. We had the top of a barn set up with a, full-on PA system, AC, couches. It was pretty chill spot. We were very lucky in that respect. But
was that
when we started, say what?
Was that Dave's place?
No, it was Jamie Good's place, and he was definitely around those days as well in Urban Ethics, but he was a Herndon High School guy, and so was Dave. So they primarily, I think, came out of Herndon High School in maybe like 87 or 88, and from there we just started taking any gig we could get, and we played a bunch, and then finally, we had a demo together, and we had gotten lucky with a couple bars in D.C. that let us come in and have our own night, and we set up shop there every Thursday night at Dillon's in Georgetown, and it was just debauchery, for a couple of years straight, having a paid steady gig like that and enjoying the benefits of, downtown D.C., you could get yourself into a lot of trouble, burn a lot of brain cells, but we had a great time doing it.
And you guys were still in high school when this was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. We were doing, I think I was a junior in high school, Dave was a senior, and I think the rest of us were I think it was all of us were juniors and one senior. And it was really cool because we started doing, college gigs, getting, fraternity parties or sororities, stuff like that. And friends of ours who had gone on to college, would book us at their schools. So, we were, on the weekends, ditching out of school on a Friday to go play at a party, and in some situations we even had a parent or two drive us to these fraternity parties.
Sounds awesome.
It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. We were very lucky, and I think we had a lot of support from our families. Everybody in the family, all the parents basically pitched in and bought us a PA system and put us on a monthly payment schedule.
Wow.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
That's great that you had that kind of support.
It's huge. It's huge. And again, and we can come full circle on the support later, but I think that's probably why there was such a thriving scene in the Reston area. I think you had a lot of very intelligent suburbanites that, either worked in D.C. or close to it. Were very smart people and very loving and in a very tight-knit community. And I think that was huge in while we were definitely punk as fuck in those days, it was still our parents that allowed us to kind of, live that lifestyle and grow that way.
So what were you guys listening to? Like, what did you kind of fashion your band after?
That's a great question. And in retrospect, what we were listening to and what we liked was a little bit different than what we played. And I think it wasn't a conscious decision, but we knew that we were in the midst of, people like Avail had just broken out in Richmond and having played with those guys a bunch of times. They were very helpful, older brother types that definitely supported and helped. So we liked a lot of the hardcore. We liked the font of the old school Chili Peppers, and a lot of the alt stuff, a lot of the heavier alt stuff. But we knew that we probably wouldn't thrive in an environment that was fairly saturated with hardcore music. And we knew that at that time, very few bars in Northern Virginia proper were hosting, punk shows and things like that. So, our first gig was, club gig was at the Safari Club downtown, which, remember, they used to do their punk rock shows, I think it was on Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
And we got in there as a non-punk act, and then we got some positive feedback there. Although at that time, in retrospect, that was a crazy neighborhood, for us to be hanging out smoking cigarettes on the streets and, being jackasses. But from there, we just kind of moved forward. I would say if you had to go back and you had to do some, stuff like influences, musical influences, stuff that we were listening to would be like, like a lot of the New Order stuff. It was those days. It's just, right around the time like The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen and all those guys were big. We kind of liked that dark Brit alt sound for a while, and we tried to emulate it in some situations. Then there was also the whole Athens, Georgia movement with the jangly guitars, and I think that worked its way into our psyche and our sound, and then all of this was on the lead up to grunge, right? So, we were definitely listening to all that stuff, prior. We were listening to Soundgarden, certainly long before, like Pearl Jam or anything like that broke out. But we loved Pearl Jam too. We loved, definitely enjoyed the Nirvana scene too, but that wasn't really instrumental or characteristic of the music we played. A lot of what we were striving for was to kind of spread a set list that could be enjoyed by everybody outside of the punk world. And even in some songs, we were definitely up tempo and a little heavier to kind of cater to some of those types of audience members. But at that time, we were just solely trying to find some sort of formula. We were certainly overthinking things and did some weaved some crazy covers into our sets. But why would you play a Social Distortion back to back with a Pogues song or something like that, right? So we were pretty all over the map on what our style and what we played as a band. But all of us were definitely into the local punk scene. I think folks like Avail were legends to us, and being able to kind of be around them was cool. I remember the LDK, just being in awe of them, as a burgeoning musician, Hostile Environment, all of those hardcore bands were I think definitely influential in driving us to play music, even though it didn't necessarily transition or transpose into the style of music we played, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's really cool that there was room, in Reston for all these different kinds of sounds and all these different kinds of bands, and that they could all play a bill together, a club together, and that people could groove on different stuff.
Absolutely.
I don't think
absolutely
back then were as locked into a genre or a sound as much as they are today. I think that the album format certainly gave people more of a chance to explore and push the boundaries of whatever their sound was,
Great point.
And I also, I don't think the 80s were necessarily known for, you know, they're not really known for any particular like sound or genre.
Right. It was just this one big hot pink and lime green orgasm.
Yeah, I was gonna say free for all, but yeah.
Well, it's the same end, right?
How did you guys go about like writing your songs?
Good question. And at the time, we struggled with, again, and then I'll bring it up. We knew, you know, we looked into how and read a lot of books on songwriting and things like that. Classic overthinking of it. And, you know, we tried to come up with a formula. And basically, you know, we would just as a group kind of grind through some ideas together. And, you know, and then when we got pissed off at each other, you know, we'd yell at each other and then break off into separate rooms, and 2 or 3 of us would go and run one room, and then we'd have a songwriting contest. And then, you know, internal competition like that tended to drive some of the music in our writing. And you know, in looking back on it today, it's horrible. It's terrible. Not
that doesn't sound good for chemistry.
Yeah. But you know, and it was interesting, and it was a transitional time in everybody's life where, you know, obviously coming out of high school, facing that big question of, all right, who's going to college and who's playing in the band.
So we're not quite there yet, I don't think.
No.
But let's get up to that question. A little bit. Let's put a pin in that for a second. You said that you guys did a recording. Were those recordings done just like 4-track style, or did you guys
So home studio stuff, fairly legit setups. You know, I think our first time recording was we'd had a 4-track, and we could do the best that we could do with that to kind of get a demo. But then we found some older in a band called The Throws out of Manassas, and Throws, and I think there's a whole little stream of bands that follow that group out there, of musicians out there. But they were very instrumental in sitting us down and walking us through the multi-track process, right? Not just tracking, but going in and doing overlays and kind of teaching us some tricks about doubling vocals here to make it stronger, or, you know, if you added like a tremolo sound to a whacked out chorus sound, it would give you kind of not a Wurlitzer cabinet, but a Hammond and Leslie cabinet sound. You know, cool things that, you know, we didn't know that we didn't know. Which kind of sparked some interest in us, and being able to kind of sit there and chart out your song from an original state across a grid it's very humbling, you know, and then to sit there and, you know, then record it and play it, that's also very humbling. So that first time experience, I think, was on like a Tascam 8 at the time, and I think we did it over 3 or 4 weekends, and I think it was maybe 8 songs in total. And then we had a local artist from Herndon High School, Lester, do our cartoony kind of, you know, cityscape drawing for Urban Ethics and all of that. So that was an awesome experience. I think a lot of bands, flounder with their first recording experience, and if they have the right guidance, it can not only get a decent capture of the band at that time, but also kind of drive you to understand and want to understand more about music, about the electronics, about all of the physics and science behind it as well.
What was the name of that album?
That was just I don't think there was a name. If memory serves, I just think it was just untitled. But then we had, I think, 3 or 4 other experiences recording, and each were progressively more complex and helped us grow and defined our sound.
Looking on the inside, wondering about the outside. Visions through your tired eyes, grass is greener on the other side. No one, no hope, no one, no place, no one.
What was the song that stood out from that first one?
We had one called Blue, which was like one that we purposely wrote for the ladies. And it, ended up being something that followed us around for years, we probably had been playing that for 4 or 5 years, and we had moved past that type of sound. And then, years later at a show, somebody's like, "Oh my God, I saw you guys. Can you play this tune?" And I was like, "Damn." Maybe.
Where did you guys come up with the title for the band, or who came up with that?
That's a great question. I don't think there was a lot of thought. I wish I had a really awesome story about what it was. I think there was, at some time, it may have been on the news, somebody said something about social justice and urban ethics, and I was like, that's kind of neat. And honestly, I think that's just the default one that didn't get thrown off the list. So.
Well, so what do you think that means, or how does that go along with your band's, ideology?
Right. That at the time we were definitely not conscious of it. We were totally sheltered white kids from the suburbs and branching out into DC area and urban area, which was a lot different than the suburbs in Reston at the time. Was something that because it was so close to us and we were so protected that we could go in for a day and out for a day, and then we thought there was kind of a duality in ethics and in the way people acted the minute you crossed the river into DC. Regardless of what neighborhood you're playing in or driving through at the time, there was definitely a different vibe. So I think it was coming to consciousness about that.
All right. I mean, it definitely kind of goes along with the whole Jam for Man idea.
Sure does. Yep.
And a lot of the punk rock kids, were sort of introduced to the idea of social justice and urban ethics through the music that they were listening to.
You're absolutely right, and I think Patty Worsler knew that.
Keep going.
I think Patty understood that was a really dynamic community in flux and in growth, and as a school official, booking a punk rock band may have raised some eyebrows in the years prior. But she did, and she did it year after year. She also threaded in some other bands. I think there was like Split Decision, a couple go-go bands, and you had a blues band, Crunchy Water, Sam Gunderson, and those guys. I think she was instrumental in kind of bringing all of those folks together, because I swear I still talk to at least half of the people in the music scene in those days today through social media and even via text message. But she definitely should get a Jams for Man Hall of Fame mention.
Yeah, absolutely. This podcast wouldn't have happened without her.
Exactly right. That exemplifies the kind of support we had in that neighborhood. There was a lot of caring and smart people that lived in those neighborhoods, and it showed. They gave back to the community, and what she did was awesome.
But see, it could go both ways, because there were a lot of caring adults,
Yeah.
and then there were a lot of repressive adults too, or there were a lot of adults who thought that they were doing the right thing,
Oh, yeah.
but weren't necessarily, weren't necessarily helping.
Well, yeah, and that was, a lot of the fuel for some of the animosity and anxiety that the kids brought to the music back then, right?
Yeah, so I guess maybe they were helping.
Yeah. It's
we just didn't
it's
realize.
An action-reaction. That's correct.
You got to have something to rebel against.
Yeah, agreed.
If you want to rock out. What was your band's experience with Jam for Man?
Wow. So I think, if memory serves, we did two of those, and then a Youth for a Better World, which was, I believe, Patty as well. And I think the first one of the first Jam for Man may have been at the Community Center, but it's still a huge venue for a small band. And with all those kids, it was amazing. But then I think we did an outdoor one at South Lakes High School, and I think Vail was in that one. That was a great time too. That was definitely an epic experience. And then Youth for a Better World was another one, and that's where I think I first met Michael Field. And I'm not sure if Crunchy Water played at that show. Crunchy Water, Sam Gunderson. So we very much enjoyed being a part of that. Even on the lead up, doing the advertising, working with Patty. Having to be young adults behaving in meetings on the lead up to the show and all of that stuff. She did it right. She knew what she was doing.
Were those the biggest crowds that you ever played?
At that time, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. At that time, for sure. And absolutely, I think if you had played a Jam for Man, you picked up a lot of momentum locally, or you were legitimized somewhat that you were a player in that scene at the time. And I think that and the crowd sizes were some amazing benefits that bands took away from that program.
Where did you guys go from there?
So we did. So I think the band itself took that decision year between high school and college, and played and just continued the debauchery, and then realized that hey, we weren't getting anywhere. Let's take a break and see what happens. And then slowly but surely, the guys started going to school, and then I think the guys from there kind of branched out.
You said weren't getting anywhere. Where did you want to get to?
We wanted to, and at the time, do the same thing that all starving artists want to do, is be able to make a living off of playing music. I don't think we were necessarily, interested in any fame or delusions of grandeur there, but we definitely were into getting our recording certificates and working in the business at some point in some way.
And so what did you do, like, band wise, to try to make that happen?
Good question. So I think we would book stuff out, and I think for our age and for our maturity at the level, we've been able to figure out how to book bands, how to get into college circuits through the NACA Association and things like that, who to talk to in clubs, what times of day can you reach, venue owners or booking agents. We worked hard to kind of get it down to a science. And we could only take it as far as we could take it at that time in that stage in our lives. And to be frank, the music, while it was fun to play, just started morphing into, when we called it quits, the music was, in my opinion, the best it ever was. And I'm sure everybody says that about their band. But we were starting to jam with Carter Blitch. He had come aboard, and we were on the road, a couple shows with him, a couple college shows with him. And Carter was with us pretty much as a friend and peer in the music scene prior to him joining the whole time. So, we definitely have lots of hooks. We're in the background as a band in the Reston scene, but we definitely have the hooks into a lot of these folks. And having played with them in various iterations of Urban Ethics and what eventually sprouted out of Urban Ethics. So just before, and while we were in our gap year there, we had changed the name to Daisy Head. We were a little more hardcore, more like a psychedelic Rage Against the Machine kind of sound, versus the jangly, poppy, alt-rock stuff of the late 80s, right? So we kind of, I think grunge and metal had its way with us in our influences in our lives and in the music we listened to, and we finally just started playing stuff we wanted to play. And it would get to the point where it'd be pretty heavy and maybe not crowd friendly, and definitely I think it was definitely a post grunge sound that we were trying to kind of grow from. And that's how we kind of, that's where we left it. We decided that even after doing all the due diligence and getting stuff like that, it was a hard life, and we were basically pussies.
And so who kept going? Like what bands sort of sprouted off?
Sure. So I kept going throughout that whole year, and I'll come around, but let me see if I can remember here. So I know that, let's see, Jamie Good went off to the College of Charleston and still plays very well to this day. He is just jamming around Seattle locally with friends. Carter Blitch obviously is playing drums for JSA at this point. Fuck yeah, Carter. And then let's see, and then that was it. That was basically it. Art Scott, who was our American Norwegian friend, played in a band called the Freshmakers here. Also played in a band called The Device with John Ireland. And he eventually moved off to Norway and is working the music scene in Norway, playing around. And then personally, after that, I kind of just, limped off to college and, brought my guitar and found some other friends to, play stuff. And we did a couple shows, which ranged from like a pop, pop punk sound, and then I worked with another band that was kind of a bluegrass band, which was a very interesting transition for me, vocally and as a guitar player. Very, very challenging. And then after college, I moved to Nashville to kind of work in the scene, help with some friends' bands, book bands, kind of work tour schedules and things like that. And that was awesome. I did not get to play as much personally as I would have liked to, but Nashville was definitely an eye-opening experience. I learned so much about it. Not just about, the craft of songwriting and the ability to play music, but again, and this is a common theme with me, is the science and the electronics behind it. Learning how to bias an amp, or learning how to mod a pedal, or fix a pedal for that matter, kind of sparked an interest in me, and we can come back to this, but in electrical engineering. So after that, I moved back, went off and taught snowboarding for a couple of years, moved back to the area, started a band with a guy named John Ireland, who was also with my former bass player, Art, and that band was called Hilo, which we put out we put an EP and a full-length, long EP, extended play, an extended EP, and then an LP, which was, in my opinion, some of the best work that I've been a part of. It was very, very, very good, and that was up to about 5 or 6 years ago. And then after that, I started playing with a band out of DC called the 27, now defunct, but a very awesome band. And I'll get you clips of all of this stuff that you can play or listen to, and see the kind of progression yourself. From the 4-track to the 24-track, right? Yeah. So that was kind of the trajectory there. I still play personally at home. Again, I got 2 young boys, so they are demanding of my time, but they like to jam out and listen and hang out too. And I think music's a big part of their life as well. And I know, Andy, you have a daughter. Is that right?
Yep. And we make music together also. She loves to make music. And we have a little recording project of our own. So
that's so rad, man.
Yeah, the best I do are with my 4-year-old.
Yeah, so it's a battle here at the household to see whether we get a drum kit or a mini half pipe in first. We'll see which one Mom gives in on.
I don't know if I pose that to my wife, which one she would hate worse.
Yeah, right. I think it all depends on the age. If it's 10 and under, you can probably deal with the drums. But at that point, drums and a 3 and a 5-year-old probably is too nerve-wracking in the household. But it is fun. The guys love music. They love, banging on the guitars and busting strings and getting wild. They know how to throw horns when they hear a rock song. Proud moment for me, for sure.
So when you talk to people about your early experiences in your high school years, and you tell them that you went to school with a veil, and you grew up going into DC and playing in DC and playing in this band. Like, what do people make of that? How do people react to that? Or do you not bring it up at all?
Well, it certainly depends on the audience. I rarely try to bring it up in polite conversation or in a professional environment, unless somebody drags it out of me, and it happens more than I'd like to admit. But when I talk about it, I certainly talk about it fondly. It was a defining moment, both I think for my personal maturity and emotional growth. And I think I can say for the rest of the guys that I've played with, and basically all the musicians that I've been in orbit with, that there was a sense of community at the time, and that's one thing, that I like to, talk about, and you could go to a show here at Reston, and then you could go catch like Coat Hanger Delivery or Scream at Cedar Crest, and if you busted a tire, somebody would hook you up and help you get home, or if you had too much to drink, take you under their wing. Definitely with that dazed and confused vibe going on back then. However, I think it's an intimacy and level of socialization that I think kids are missing today.
Yeah.
And if we'd had cell phones back then, we'd all be in jail, number one. Two, we wouldn't have forged the relationships we were forced to forge because we didn't have a screen in our face. So that was I think it was a defining period in a lot of boys and girls' lives in the Reston scene that, that they had that community, that they knew it could be tight and it could be like that in other communities. And I think people have taken that forward into their lives.
And what else are you using from what you learned, like from this whole journey? Like what are you still applying to your life today?
There's a lot of things, right? I think at the time I was a painfully shy person, inwardly, but outwardly as a lead singer, I was forced to kind of come out of my shell and, learn, not just, how to talk in front of a crowd or what to say or what not to say and when to not say something and learn that kind of that communication. I think, but it definitely helped. Years later, I worked as an intern at WHFS, and I think my knowledge of music from there and being in front of a microphone regularly there and playing music, all of that has made me an outward person. I'm by no means an introvert, but definitely not the most outgoing person but I've overcome that, and I think that's something that I've taken away personally for being involved in that scene. Another piece is, my love for music, my love for all styles of music, right? One thing, and I love live music and local music in D.C. is a great scene right now. It's vibrant. There are a million bands, a million places to practice, and a lot more venues, I think. D.C. is a thriving music town. It's come a long way. Back from the glory of the old hardcore days. It certainly will never be as epic or as iconic as those days were in D.C., but definitely know that something is shaking on Shakedown Street here. That's great. So my love for music, my love to get out to see live bands is something that I still have today. I still record a little bit, just mess around, and I've switched bass over to bass over the years. So that has been a transition for me as well. And I love the bass. I'll never go back to guitar. I can help it.
Do you ever miss performing live?
Yeah. I over the last decade, I've had my fair share of shows and time in the studio And right now with the kids and, just coming out of baby jail, I still can't justify the time away and the commitment needed for, to put on a show that I would be proud of putting on. It doesn't mean that I won't jump onto an open mic night somewhere or fill in for somebody now and again. But I miss it? Sure, I do. But it was just more than the performance at that point. It was just being lucky enough and grateful enough and have the gratitude to be able to, still jam and do it, and still book shows and still get out there and play, X number of shows a year. It's a blessing to be able to do it. And, I look back at a lot of my peers and sometimes I look at them and I'm like, man, they are old. Then I realize, well, you look old wearing Chuck Taylors on a stage with a Rickenbacker bass, buddy.
Ago, we were joined by kids. Now we're back to the beginning with our hearts on the skids. How did we get to here? And where will it go? Trying hard, thinking about it, with nothing new to know. Friday we had fun, by Saturday I'm not the one. You say you don't. Stop moving forward, I was barely holding on. We fight all the time, make up the same.